At 800 feet below, the rules of life and death don't apply. A decade-old mystery, a diver's impossible promise, and a cave that never gives up its dead. This is the story of Dave Shaw and the dive that cost him everything. Under the cracked surface of New Mexico, where desert winds whisper secrets over dry stone, there lies a body of water so deceiving in its calm, it has lured adventurers into its depths with promises it never keeps. They call it the Blue Hole, a sapphire pit carved by time and accident, where sunlight dances at the surface but vanishes as quickly as courage in the dark. It is at 84 feet below the surface that the illusion fractures. A bathtub-sized opening peers into nothingness. A hole just big enough to swallow a man with ambition and never spit him back out. In 1976, two divers from Oklahoma dared to enter that forbidden throat of the earth. Their bodies were later found by a police team who nearly suffered the same fate. The cavern punished their curiosity with confusion, turning direction into delusion and time into a noose. The authorities warned the landowners. This section was lethal, but rather than illuminate its treacherous veins, they sealed it with steel and stone. The Blue Hole's mouth was shut for 40 years. Then came 2016, an elite diving group known as the ADM Exploration Foundation, whose business is darkness and whose hobby is charting the edges of human fear, petitioned to enter the forbidden zone. Permission was granted. Among them was Shane Thompson, a man bred in the abyss. A former United States Navy diving instructor turned cave exploration veteran, Shane had 20 years of experience taming black water. That day, March 26, 2016, was meant to be a cautious toe dip into legend. Shane was assigned to stand by on land, but legends don't wait for permission. Mike Young was the diver assigned to enter the cave first. He slipped into the water expecting solitude, only to see Shane descending toward him. They exchanged no words. Their air, their thoughts, their fates merged as they approached the threshold. The entrance gaped like a wound, narrow, oppressive, unlit. Shane entered first, pulling himself into the unknown. Mike followed. Within moments, the murk betrayed them. Silt, undisturbed for 4 decades, rose in clouds that suffocated light and sense. The tunnel narrowed as they progressed, but visibility was gone, and the walls were shrinking. Then came the betrayal of space itself. Shane, blindly seeking an opening, wriggled into a false promise of an exit. Mike, following close, became wedged as the tunnel closed its jaws around them. Shane panicked, kicking furiously, his fins striking Mike's face, stirring the darkness into a frenzy. Mike retreated as far as he could, inching backward into the central passage. But Shane pushed ahead into the tight crevice. Through adrenaline or madness, he forced his way into what opened up into a larger chamber. Mike waited for his return. When minutes stretched into dread, he followed. At the chamber's mouth, tunnels spidered in every direction. Shane had vanished. Mike pressed forward, past fear, through the gap Shane had clawed into a hell of pitch and pressure. He swam blindly, choosing the largest tunnel. It spiraled, narrow and winding, as if the cave itself was curling in on him. When it ended in silence. Shane Thompson was there, curled at the end, mouthpiece drifting, dead. A victim not of the cave, but of the mind unraveled by pressure, disorientation, and panic. His instincts betrayed him. He had swum toward salvation only to find a dead end. The cave had claimed him. They resealed the entrance. The Blue Hole swallowed its story again. In Florida, beneath the mirrored surface of Indian Springs, a labyrinth of tunnels hides in the deep like the veins of some slumbering beast. The average diver floats above them, unaware. But those who descend beyond 120 feet cross a threshold into the sacred and the damned. There, at 300 feet, tunnels diverge like paths in a haunted forest, each darker than the last. In November 1991, 2 elite divers, Parker Turner and Bill Gavin, were tasked with mapping these unknown corridors. They were the only 2 assigned to pass through Squaw's restriction, a pinched chamber in the system's throat, narrow as fear itself. Before the descent, they dropped a guideline, weighted with an anchor, to guide them through the yawning belly of the cave. It was their breadcrumb trail, their only lifeline should vision fail. As they passed through Squaw's restriction, they noted a sign embedded in the stone, a double arrow pointing upstream and down. It seemed innocuous. It would become a marker of doom. They reached their target depth. They scouted, recorded, floated in the liquid silence. And when 25 minutes passed, they turned to rise. Following the line, they reached Squaw's restriction and confusion. The line led not through open water, but into a wall of sediment and rock. It was as if the cave had rewritten itself in their absence. They retraced their steps, skeptical of their instruments, until they again saw the twin arrows. It was then they understood. Squaw's restriction had caved in. They were sealed in. Words no longer worked. They wrote messages to one another on slates. "What are we going to do now?" Parker asked. "Let's look around," Bill responded. They clawed at the rubble. But for every handful removed, the earth returned its own in greater force. Silt clouded vision. Debris blocked light. Time thinned. Parker held up his air gauge. 10 minutes. Bill's showed the same. Parker repeated the question. "What are we going to do now?" Bill didn't know. Parker made his gamble. He removed his tanks, squeezed into the rubble, and vanished. Moments later, Bill saw his empty tanks wedged in the obstruction. Parker had gone forward on a breath hold, aiming for the emergency tanks they'd left further up. Bill, seeing a narrow breach made by Parker's passage, squeezed through. At the brink of unconsciousness, he reached the spare tanks. Parker had almost made it. They found his body floating in the void 30 meters off. The darkness had taken him in his final desperate swim. Equipment left behind. Hope carried only in lungs. And now to South Africa. On a remote game farm sits Bushman's Hole, an 800-foot dive into the abyss. Its entrance appears insignificant, an innocent puddle in a crater's basin. But it opens into the largest freshwater cave in the world, and it seduces with a promise of discovery and silence. For Dion Dreyer, a thrill-seeking 20-year-old, it was irresistible. In December 1994, Dion dove with a group to 492 feet. He was experienced, prepared, calm, until he wasn't. At one point in the ascent, he vanished. One moment he signaled all was well. The next, his light drifted down into the dark, unattached. He was gone. Too deep, too fast. The rescuers made the only choice they could. They left him. Authorities found only his helmet. His parents, shattered, placed a plaque at the entrance. It was the only grave they would have. A decade passed. Then came Dave Shaw. At 50, he was a diver cut from boulder cloth. In 2004, while descending beyond 800 feet, he found a body. Floating, arms outstretched in the black, face hidden beneath a mask resting on a skull. It was Dion. Shaw vowed to return him to the surface. He tied a line to Dion's remains and ascended. At the surface, he called Dion's parents. "I will bring him back," he said. They wept. They believed. January 8, 2005. The recovery dive was planned like a military operation. Shaw would go first, retrieve the body, and pass it up through a human chain of divers, each stationed at depth intervals. Dion's parents arrived after Shaw had submerged, hearts straining with impossible hope. At 6:13 a.m., Dave entered the water. 13 minutes later, the diver above him looked down and saw no movement. Shaw's light was still. He did not rise. A diver tried to reach him, but a malfunctioning gauge forced him back. He wrote on his slate, "Dave's not coming back." The message climbed through hands and depths to the surface, where silence shattered around Dion's parents. No rescue, no recovery, only guilt and mourning. But days later, as the team returned to retrieve the gear left behind, bubbles surged from the depths. Then, unthinkably, bodies rose from the black. Shaw had freed Dion, and in death they returned together. Shaw's helmet camera recorded it all. Frame by frame, they dissected his final moments. Dion's body, loosened by time, floated wildly. Shaw, overwhelmed by motion and silt, became entangled in the very line meant to save him. As panic overtook him, his breathing turned desperate. His hands clutched in used scissors. His body drifted in confusion. Narcosis gripped him. The cave did not forgive. In his final seconds, he turned from Dion and tried to swim for life. But his breath gave out before his will did, and the silence swallowed him. Yet in death, Dave Shaw did the impossible. He brought a son back to his parents. In the darkness of 3 tombs carved by water, where air runs thin and light dissolves into nothing, these stories remain. Shane Thompson, Parker Turner, Dion Dreyer, and Dave Shaw, names etched not just in stone or water, but in the uncharted depths of human obsession, courage, and the cost of curiosity. So now tell us, would you have gone into those caves knowing what others never came back from? Was it bravery? Or was it obsession that drove men like Shane Thompson and Dave Shaw deeper than safety allowed? And do you believe there are places on Earth not meant to be touched, forgotten for a reason? We want your thoughts in the comments. And if these stories chilled you, subscribe, because the next mystery we dive into might be darker than the last.